Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I thought I would backtrack a little bit and explain a little more about why I decided to live in my truck camper and to do van life, and also why I am no longer doing it. I did have a question on my Instagram asking if I was still living full-time in my truck and camper, and the answer to that is no. I haven't been living in my camper for probably about 7 or 8 months now. So I thought I'd explain a little bit about why I am living in a house, in a rental, and just a little bit more about that. I am also very surprised because I was not expecting my pros and cons of living in a truck camper video to be one of my most popular videos, but it is, and it still gets a lot of views, and there are a lot of comments and opinions on that video, which again, I guess I just wasn't expecting it. But I thought I would be able to answer some of the questions and concerns that people had from that video in this one a little bit better. So here we go. So essentially, living in my truck and camper or living in van life for me was never about just having fun, traveling and seeing the world, traveling more places. Although I did some more traveling because of van life, my intention living in a truck and camper was never to just be driving around and exploring more. For me, living in the camper and having a vehicle again was mostly so that I could save money, because I was not saving anything when I lived in my apartment, and also to have the mobility to work several jobs. So while I lived in the truck and camper, I had seasonal work as a blueberry picker that was about a month long. And then I also had a part-time job at a health food store, a part-time job as a nanny, and then I was also working on my birth doula work on the side of all of that as well. So a little bit of background. I moved to Vancouver Island, which is probably the most mild winter weathered place in terms of Canada, and I was going to college there, so I took my holistic birth doula course and my holistic nutrition course at the college. And while I was going to school, I was living pretty much downtown in Victoria on the island, and my rent was pretty expensive, especially just for me. I lived alone. I had a bachelor apartment, and I paid essentially $1,200 a month to be living there. And I did not have a vehicle while I lived there because it was just not affordable to have a vehicle on the side of all of those other costs. Also, it's a very expensive part of the country, and groceries and all other expenses just were a little bit more. So overall, my cost of living was very expensive. I was going to school, and that's just what worked and I needed for that time in my life. But once I was done college, it just very quickly occurred to me that I could not keep paying those astronomical costs to live unless I got some crazy full-time job and didn't continue on with doula work and passion, and also nannying wouldn't cut it. I realized that I had to make a sacrifice. I realized that I had to make a change just to have a cheaper cost of living, to be able to afford living. I didn't want to be homeless in the sense of living on the street, so homeless living in a van was a better option. Essentially, there's two ways I could have gone. I could have decided to find a basement suite and rent with 3 or 4 other people, and rent would have been a lot cheaper that way. Or I could have lived in my truck and camper. And the reason why I decided to live in my truck camper was because I wanted the mobility that having a vehicle brought, And in terms of the work that I was doing, having several different jobs and needing to travel between cities and towns to do those, I really wanted that freedom of having a vehicle. So I decided to live in my vehicle, and yeah. The one thing about my pros and cons of living in a truck camper video is I have a lot of comments from like middle-aged men telling me how I should have or could have done living in my truck camper a lot better, because as you know, it was not weatherproof, and as winter, or well, even fall came to the island, I was having a lot of issues with the camper being cold and getting moldy. I also lived on an island, so it is just generally really wet all the time and really hard not to have mold. Even in homes, mold is a big issue there. But yeah, I guess what I want to say is I was not, and I still am not, a pro in terms of having the knowledge to be able to do van life right, to negate the issues that I faced. I didn't have months or even years of research or knowledge about living in a vehicle or a truck camper to be able to do it in probably the best or smartest way possible. I was strapped for money and didn't have the ability to deck out my truck camper with insulation, first of all, or solar panels, or diesel heat. I know there's a lot of different ways that you can try to warm up a truck camper, and it was also a very old model. I think it was like a 1972 truck camper, so it was not insulated. Lots of the wood was exposed on the bottom of it, and so really it is not an all weather or all season type of living vessel. But yeah, essentially I had minimal research and minimal money to make it work for myself and do the best that I could to live in it as long as I possibly could. It was perfect during the summer. It was absolutely wonderful. I mean, it was a big rig. Like, I definitely felt the pressure of parking that thing in the beginning. But yeah, it was a really ideal situation for me, especially in the summer. I had a lot of commuting that I had to do, so to be able to live in different towns while I had a job in different areas was really awesome. But the most difficult part came when winter came and it was cold and moldy, and it just wasn't like a nice place to like hang out in or live in. And I understand, before you comment, there are a lot of things I could have done to, like I said, negate those issues, but time, money, like I said, I was working like 3 different jobs, trying to just save as much money as I possibly could so that I could get away for the winter. So even though I was living in probably the nicest temperature-wise place in Canada that has the most mild winter, it was still my goal to be able to go away for the winter, and yeah, just not have to like suffer through a cold winter in a camper, and just use part of the money that I had saved to be able to go away and enjoy some sun. So in January, I left and I went to Mexico with my partner, and we were there for 2 months. And then during that time, we had started to see a little bit of stuff about this COVID-19 on Reddit, and I didn't really think anything of it. My partner, on the other hand, was concerned and thought that when we got back home, it might become more of an issue. And he was right. When we got back home after 2 months in Mexico, it slowly just started shutting everything down. And I think this is when we both realized, he was also living in his van, it just was going to be extremely difficult to continue living, not only in that area, but just in vehicles. So March was really cold, and yeah, it was a really difficult month. A lot was going on just in my personal life, and I was nannying as soon as we got back. With the coronavirus restrictions and shutdowns of things, That meant that the town that we were living in and parking our vehicles in was closing down public washrooms, restaurants, grocery stores, not the grocery stores, but the washrooms in the grocery stores, and also the community centers like the public library. So no ability to like sit and have heat or Wi-Fi in a library or use those public washrooms. And then also the gyms were closing. So our options for having a shower or going to the bathroom were little to none. It was just increasingly difficult to not have any public space or facilities to use in that sense. Really, living in a van, you are categorized the same as you were if you were homeless and had a tent. There were no places to use washrooms, no places to have a shower or use the gym, no places really to have Wi-Fi unless you were able to like sit outside of a building and use that Wi-Fi, and it just got really difficult. So I was actually then living with the family that I was nannying for. They were gracious enough to have me live with them because they were going through a difficult situation when the schools had all closed down and their 3 children could no longer go to school, and they both had jobs to work and needed someone to look after the kids, but school and daycare were closed. So it ended up working out well for me just because I was able to live in a house and have facilities and everything, and still my job. Then at the end of March, I also ended up needing a surgery, which was a whole nother ordeal because the hospitals were kind of closing down, and going through medical stuff like on your own alone is also really difficult. But that pretty much would have been impossible, like at least emotionally and mentally for me, had I been in a vehicle during that time. Come the end of April, myself and my partner made the decision that staying on Vancouver Island was just not going to be an option for us because the cost of living and rent was so high and jobs were just also very difficult to find. So we made a move and we got very lucky. I still thank our lucky stars that we found the rental we're in right now for the price that it is. We have a really lovely place with a lot of space and a yard, and we're in a small town, which means essentially we can walk most places. We don't have to spend a lot of money on gas, which we do share a vehicle, but we don't need to use it all the time. And also groceries and everything, just not being in a big city or on an island means that our cost of living is even less. With both of us splitting the rent for this place, it makes it very affordable. Essentially, I think I'm paying about the same amount of money. I might actually be saving a small amount of money now versus when I was in my truck camper. So overall, it's been a really good move. And yeah, I just wanted to clear the air because I was still getting questions about whether or not I was living in a camper, and I am not. Now, this is not to say that it was impossible to continue living in a vehicle, van, camper, whatnot during the worst part of the coronavirus pandemic. That's not it at all. I know people personally and through YouTube that did it. However, there were sacrifices that they had to make, and it was not easy. And I still don't think it's easy. Everything is still kind of different, not just with wearing masks in places, but having less options in terms of public facilities and spaces to be. In terms of living in Canada, there's not a whole lot of options of where you can go where you're not going to have a really harsh winter or fall. Like in a lot of places where I'm actually from, it gets to minus 40 degrees Celsius sometimes, not every day, but it's pretty common actually for a majority of the winter to be minus 30s Celsius. And so although it is doable to live in a vehicle, like I said, there are people on YouTube I've seen that do live in those places where I'm from, and they live in those temperatures in their vans. It's just really taxing. It's hard on the body. You're just constantly striving to find heat, and cooking is significantly harder as well. There's just a lot of things that, yeah, made me really grateful to be in like an apartment or a home space again and have my own washroom. But yeah, just certain things like having a shower or going to the bathroom got really difficult as the pandemic closed places down. So like I was saying, it's not impossible, obviously, to do during this time, but it was just the easiest choice for me to make was to go back to renting. And the fact that I am able to actually still spend less on my cost of living now compared to when I lived in my truck camper is really exciting for me and makes it feel like I'm still doing the right thing in terms of not ever having to go into debt. So anyways, that's going to be the video for today. I hope you enjoyed watching. Yeah, please comment, rate, and subscribe. I will see you in my next video. I'll see you later, guys. Bye.